Thank you very much. Welcome to the July 27th meeting of the Traffic and Transportation Commission for the City of Calabasas. I'm Peter Valk, Chair of the Commission, and we'll do a roll call to ascertain who from my fellow commissioners is here. Commissioner Soriano.
Here.
Commissioner Schechter.
Present.
Commissioner Sperling.
Here.
Commissioner Kuzanea.
Here.
Commissioner Schechter, Student Commissioner Schechter.
Here.
And that's who we have from the commission today. We have city staff joining us, as well as a representative from the Sheriff's Department. With that, Matthew, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Let's do it. Let's rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
One
one
nation,
nation,
under
under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
The next item on our opening matters is the announcements and introductions. Are there any announcements from either city staff or commissioners, and any introductions?
Mr. The only thing I would like to remind you, Tatiana Alexandrov is our new student commissioner, and Nicholas Yalda is nowhere to be seen. So she's gonna be a future primary student commissioner. So we're gonna get her more involved. And I'm proud of Gracie that she's here tonight.
Thank you very much for making the introduction. Tatiana, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you go to school, what grade you're in, what's your interest in participating?
Sure. I go to Calabasas High School, and I'm going to be a senior. And I'm really excited to be a part of the Traffic and Transportation Commission, and I really hope to learn more about the city and everything.
Very good. We're going to count on you to be our eyes and ears on the improvements in the vicinity of the high school.
Of course.
Thank you. Gracie, did you have a question?
Oh, I just had a quick announcement. I just want to say that I believe this will be my last meeting. I'm leaving for college quite soon, but I feel really grateful to have been a part of this group, and I'm really excited to be here for our last meeting. So I just want to say thank you and give that brief announcement.
Did you ask your mother if you can go to college?
I think she approves of my leaving, yes.
Where will you be going to school?
I'm going to be attending Northwestern University in Evanston.
Wow.
Very good. Well, we hope you remain a Dodgers fan and don't go over to the Cubs.
Yes, I won't go over to the Cubs. Maybe attend a few games, but Dodgers fan at heart.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else with an announcement or introduction? Okay, hearing none. Next item on opening matters is to consider the approval of the agenda. And Tom, this would be a time to announce any changes you might propose.
Actually, the person from Flock Camera Systems was not able to attend tonight, so we can leave the agenda as it is.
Okay, very good. And then, given that there's no changes, fellow commissioners, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second, any discussion on the matter? All those approving the agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, raising your hand. Very good, thank you. And last item under opening matters is the approval of the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was on June 22nd. And I'm assuming everyone has a copy of the meeting minutes and has had a chance to review them. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I move for approval of the meeting minutes.
Okay, and is there a second?
Jason seconded.
Jason, thank you. Any discussion on the matter? All those approving of the agenda of the meeting minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, very good, thank you. So moved. The next item on our agenda is we have a public comment period. This is the time of our agenda where the public has a chance to offer comments and recognizing on any unagendized item, recognizing that the commission is not able to take up discussion of that item. But if the public would like to bring forth a matter for the commission's attention that's not on the agenda, this would be the time to do so. Anna, are there any members of the public participating and have indicated an interest to speak at this time?
No, Chair Volk, I did not receive any correspondence and we do not have anybody wishing to speak at the moment.
Very good. Anna, as a matter of process, if someone wants to speak either at this point on the agenda or on an agenda item, do they have to submit some type of documentation, like a speaker's card that is done when we're in chambers?
In this case, no. If they attend via the webinar, they can just go ahead and give their name and what the item they want to speak on, just like as if they were there. It's just through the internet, through messaging. But
Okay,
otherwise,
then we would have record of that, correct?
yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So hearing no public comment, we'll take up our first, we have two agenda items. We have item number 1, which is the neighborhood traffic calming guidelines, and item number 2, which is the automated license plate recognition program. Tom, I'm going to ask you on item number 2, if the representative from the vendor is not attending, does that change the nature of the presentation?
It does not. We had the same presentation last night at Public Safety, and the questions that I was not able to answer, I wrote down. So I think I can answer all your questions this evening.
Very good. Well, we'll assume that our comrades at Public Safety scrubbed this very carefully, and you've learned so much from that experience that it will help move us along. Thank you.
And sorry, the advantage is we get the Sheriff's Department with us tonight, who was not there last night. So
very good. Thank you. So looking at our agenda, we typically have a Sheriff's Department report. Anna or Robert, is that something that is not on this agenda tonight for a particular reason? Is it out of sequence or what?
Unfortunately, our sheriff's representative, Detective Hilson, is out of the office on vacation. Also, generally, when we present the sheriff's reports, the one that we have, what would be for May, and now it would be June, has not even been presented to council yet, so it has not been provided. So being that council went dark in July, and then their only council meeting we had was in late June, on that agenda, there was no sheriff's report. So once they resume, then we can actually accumulate May, June, July, and whichever one else. And then by that time, hopefully Detective Hilson will be back to provide that. And school will be open, so he can give us the update with the school area traffic along with Maryland's reports.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Anna. Appreciate that procedural note. So with that item, why don't we take up our first item, which is neighborhood traffic calming guidelines. And Tom, are you leading us in that presentation?
I am. It's the Tom show tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair and members of the commission. I'm here tonight to talk about the first draft of our neighborhood traffic calming program. And this is a program that it really is meant to kind of bring a more programmatic approach to addressing the traffic issues raised by our citizens and our residents. Prior to us having this draft program, it was done one of two ways. The city previously had some capital improvement projects that went out on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis and did some traffic calming installations. And we have addressed issues as they come in from the public kind of on a one-on-one basis. But this will be an opportunity to kind of create a program that we can then follow and provide a way for us and the citizens to sort of work towards a solution. It's a combination of enforcement, education, and engineering measures. And really the goal of these types of programs is to improve community safety and the livability of our neighborhoods by reducing traffic volumes and traffic speeds on the streets that people live. The program is a multi-level approach. This is something that a lot of programs have moved to from having initially when these programs were first put in place in the 90s, a lot of them just had a list of like 30 or 40 different things that could be done. And they've now moved to a multi-level approach where you start at some of the less restrictive and easy to install, doesn't require a lot of public meetings and public outreach because the impact is less on the general driving public. And then the level 3 are the ones where we're physically putting something out in the roadway, and that requires a lot more public input, but it allows the city to more quickly kind of address issues and see if the most cost-effective things can solve the problem before we get bombarded with a bunch of requests for things like speed cushions and roundabouts. Just to kind of make it clear right off the bat, this whole program does not apply to private streets. People that live in neighborhoods that have private streets, those streets are owned and maintained by the homeowners association or whatever organization is there. And for the most part, they can do a variety of things on their own as long as they don't change the circulation pattern of the neighborhood as it was approved when it was first built, in terms of access points and those types of things. And even on private streets, they're going to have to coordinate with both the sheriff's department and county fire. There's a minimum criteria that we're recommending for these sort of higher level, level 2 and 3 implementations. One is that it is what's called a local residential street. And those are streets that are primarily fronting residential, low density in character, with a volume of at least 800 vehicles a day. Speed measurements where we would go out and actually use a radar gun to measure the speed on the street. And if our measurements come out showing that there's actually a speeding problem by showing that the speeds are 7 miles an hour or more over the posted speed limit. And that if one of the solutions we eventually get to is something like a speed cushion, that the street can't be too steep. So the way that the program works is there's this level approach, and the level 1 is sort of the first line. Any resident can call and express a concern, and that kind of automatically gets you into level 1. It can apply to any street. It doesn't have to be just a local street. So if people are concerned about speeding on one of the arterial or collector streets, the level 1 can address that with the tools available there. And I'll talk about those later. When you get to level 2, which is kind of the signing and striping options, there's this action request form that has to be filled out where a resident would go and talk to a few of their neighbors to kind of demonstrate that it's not just 1 or 2 people, but it's actually several of the neighbors are saying, yes, there actually is a problem that the city needs to look at. And then when you get to level 3, which are the physical improvements, there's actually a much more formal petition process that requires 90% of the people in what the city identifies as the affected area with at least a 2/3 majority support. And that the city would then put in kind of a trial period of trying something out on a temporary basis. And then the city would perform a survey of the property owners in the affected area and would need to get a 2/3 support and at least 50% of the responses to then take that final recommendation from the community to city council for approval. The level 1 measures, again, this targets kind of enforcement and education, applies to any public street. And so it's police enforcement of speeds or turning movements or other moving or parking violations. And then the other option at this level 1 is the temporary speed display radar trailer, of which the city is in the process of purchasing a new one. And this is really to kind of let people know, hey, you're exceeding the speed limit, please slow down. Typically what works really well is you put the trailer out there for a couple of weeks, maybe move it around on the street, and then you follow it up the next few weeks with targeted enforcement. And the officer can, kind of tell people, hey, you were notified weeks in advance. You should have seen that you were speeding when you saw the trailer that was just out. The level 2 measures, these are signing and striping changes. So if the community thinks that having the temporary speed display device was effective, they can request a speed feedback sign, which is a kind of a permanent sign that is placed on the street to remind people. There's a good example in the picture here that is out in front of City Hall. Posting of 25-mile-per-hour signs. So for our local residential streets, those are what's called a prima facie speed limit of 25. The city is not legally obligated to post the 25-mile-an-hour limit because drivers should know that it is a 25-mile-an-hour limit, but posting them can often remind people that, hey, this is a residential street that has a slower speed limit. We can go in and put in some edge lines to kind of narrow things and make it a little tighter. That could be effective on some streets that have a curvilinear pattern to them. If the street is fairly straight, putting additional striping on the street that is also straight actually can sometimes have the opposite effect of then providing these sort of chutes for people to drive faster on. So we have to be a little careful how we implement those. Turning movement restrictions by time of day or permanently. So on Parkmore, this picture here is when you turn off of Las Virgenes, there's a morning restriction so that parents going to drop their kids off at the school don't drive on this residential street, that they go up to Teal Boulevard. And then you can post commercial vehicle restrictions if the issue is related to commercial vehicles. And then with this level 2, there's sort of lots of options in the signing and striping area that the city can consider and kind of work with the residents on finding a solution that works. Level 3 is sort of the top level. And this is, at least at this time, we're recommending that we restrict it to these 4 options. Curb extensions, which is in the upper right corner. These are ways of kind of narrowing the street at gateway points at intersections, making it a little easier for pedestrians to cross. Medians, this is a picture of a median that was installed on Parkmore at one of the intersections to kind of create, again, that narrowing of the street and a little bit of a barrier that people have to slow down to go around. Neighborhood roundabout. This is an aerial view of the one over on Park Sorrento. And speed cushions, which is something that we don't have many of in Calabasas, but there are some that were recently installed by the city over on Dry Canyon Cold Creek. This is actually a picture of some I recently put in the city of Port Hueneme, and they're made from recycled rubber, which can be used as a temporary measure and kind of moved around for the temporary, and then later come in and build them out of asphalt if they become permanent. There are potential impacts with particularly these level 3 type of measures. They can affect emergency vehicle response time. So one of the reasons why we've moved to the speed cushion is that, if you can see my cursor, is that the fire truck has a wide enough wheelbase that it can go around the hump essentially or go over it, whereas a regular vehicle that's only 6 feet wide cannot. Some of them may result in the loss of on-street parking. So particularly where we put in the medians, the roundabouts, the curve extensions, we could potentially lose on-street parking in a residential neighborhood, which may or may not be significant considering the neighborhood. They could have a negative visual impact, particularly if there's a whole bunch of signage that's involved with the turning movement restrictions. So for instance, up at Parkmore and Teal Boulevard, where there's a kind of a partial street closure at the top. There's a lot of signs up there, and for some people, that's a visual clutter issue. The other thing is when we put in the temporary measures that they're not always super pretty. It tends to be striping and delineators and plastic curbing and those types of things. Maybe some small boxed trees or something to try and help soften it. And the other issue to consider is that the support may change over time. So a community may come in with a whole lot of support to put in a neighborhood roundabout or put in a median, and then as that community changes over time, they may want to approach the city about taking it out because it's having negative impacts. And the current draft policy does not have a process for removal, but that's something that we can add in. And then lastly, just to talk kind of about the next steps before we get into Q&A, we want to receive and incorporate the comments from the commission. The step after that, we'll be having some internal cross-departmental review at the city, and then discussions with the sheriff's department and county fire, and then bring it back to the commission with a kind of a final draft before we take it to city council for consideration. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. I had a number of different questions throughout the guidelines document itself, so I'll take my comments up after I hear from my colleagues. Jacques, do you have any comments that you'd like to, or questions to pose to Tom or Robert?
Just a quick question would be the 800 vehicles per day, the 800 VDP or VPD per day. Like when you did Park Sienna and you put in, this is before my time on the commission, but you put in the speed bump and signage and all, does that get 800 cars or more in a day? Is that one of the criteria that if it doesn't get that many, you can't even bring it to the next level? Is that my understanding of that criteria?
Yeah, the purpose of that criteria is for those lower volume streets, because we're using public funds, so we want to make sure the public funds are being used in appropriate places. So where you have 800 vehicles a day or less, it's typically a street that is a cul-de-sac that doesn't have a lot of homes on it. So if you think that'd be like 50 homes would be 500 vehicles a day or 600 vehicles a day. So it's variable. Agencies that I've looked at and other programs that I've created have varied from 500 to 1,200 as that sort of lower limit. Some cities also have an upper limit, which I didn't propose here, which can be as much as 6,000 or 7,000 cars a day, because then the street's really not acting as a local street, and maybe you have other issues with your circulation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jacques. Jason. Jason, your volume is very low. Is it just me, or can we not? Can anybody else hear Jason?
He's hard to hear.
Okay. Go to somebody else. I'll see if I can fix it. We can't hear you, Jason. I'm sorry.
You said go to someone else, and then
go to someone else.
It.
Okay, yeah. We heard you. We heard you on that one. Matthew.
Hey, couple questions. First, small inconsistency that I want to clear up: 7 residents or 7 homeowners? Because if residents are going to act as the gatekeepers to what the city's going to look at, we need to make sure that the 7 are worthy. So no children, obviously. But what are we talking about? Registered voters, homeowners on the title? I mean, sometimes not even applicable. Residents, what is it? What's the standard?
No, that's a really good question, and every city handles it differently. It used to just be residents for most programs, but so, most cities have moved to the more permanent things to be property owners. So the way I've structured the program now is that the first 2 levels just require residents, and they do need to be residents of 7 different households. So maybe that clarification would be good to make. But when it comes to those level 4, it has to be the property owner that buys into it because they have the economic interest in the house. And what you don't want is, as a homeowner, you don't want your tenant speaking for you.
Yeah, we do have to keep in mind, of course, Calabasas Village and our condos. I don't know how condos are owned, but apartments. There are many renters who don't own land per se. So just keep that into account when moving forward, please. Another question, and this is probably a tough one to pinpoint, but at some point the city is going to have to do some surveying, and I know it's largely dependent on how many areas are of focus, but what's the cost to the city? I mean, that's always got to be a question for surveying specifically.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Back in the days before we had online surveys, we had to send out postcards, and that could be pretty expensive, both in sending them out and collecting them, because you have to send out, self-addressed and posted to get it back, and then you had to sort of hand process them. The intent here is that we believe a lot of the homeowners and residents in the city have email addresses, and we would be requiring that on the petition so that it would be in like a Survey Monkey type of thing, where we would then limit the Survey Monkey entries to individual people. Now we would send it to those individual emails. So in that case, the cost is pretty low. The downside of doing something like a Survey Monkey is that they could give that survey to a number of people that don't live on the street. They could have their 5 family members all vote one way or another. So there's some hazards to doing it that way that we would need to think about. The postcards worked really well because we would actually put a stamp on them where when you got it back, if it didn't have that or it looked like it was copied, then it would get rejected. So.
Thank you, Matthew. Anything else? Matthew? Okay. And that would leave us with next, before my comments, would be Jill Schechter. You're muted, Jill.
Thank you. Just, I appreciate that. A couple more questions about the survey, if we could stay on that subject for a moment. If there is no email provided, would the signature still be valid?
Good question. We could go either way. So we could say, yes, you have to, otherwise it's rejected. And one of the things that I didn't mention, but I don't notice if you all read it in there, is that when we actually get the survey, we would be doing a follow-up on the survey. So we'd have a name and at least a phone number. We would be contacting us 20% of the people in the survey to verify that they actually are saying what they think they're saying. So we could call the people that didn't provide email addresses and say, hey, if you want to be able to do the survey when we get to the end of this, if it goes through, please give us your email address.
I was curious with respect to the level 3 petitions. It specifies that they must have contacted and obtained signatures by 90% of affected property owners. How does that compare, if you know, to the number of properties that are owner occupied in the city? does our city come close to even being 90% owner occupied?
I don't know the answer to that question, and that has been an issue with some agencies that I've worked in, is that the person that goes around, so the city will give them a list and a map that says these are the affected properties. So for instance, if we were re-looking at Parkmore, the area of impact would just be those people that live on Parkmore or on the little cul-de-sac side street. So it'd be, 40 or 50 residents, and we would tell them that they have to get, 90% of them, at least talk to them and get them to sign the petition, yes or no. It does become hard because the property owner. So when they approach them and there's a resident there, what we tell them to do is to have the resident tell their landlord, can you please call this person? It is probably the most difficult part of the process for the person who's trying to collect the petition. It can sometimes take weeks or longer to gather that. And that's the hard work that they have to put in. We don't have to put the threshold at that level. It's something that a lot of cities do, but not every city does. So again, it's if the commission wants to consider a different way of doing it, we're certainly open to that.
So I guess I would note that concern that I understand the balance of making sure that public funds are well spent. However, that has to be balanced against a process that is reasonable and realistic to ever be accomplished by residents. Just a couple more questions. Is there any time requirement on level 1 and level 2 measures being in place before moving on to the next level?
Yes. Let me
I thought I saw somewhere 180 days. Might be from level
you know what?
2
Yeah. After level. There is not for level 1. There should be. I think when I reformatted it, it got taken out. Typically, it's like 90 days for that first level. It could be 60 or 90 days, but not a long amount of time. Oh no, here level 2. So under level 2, it says results for level 2 signs will only be considered for streets that have already implemented level 1 within the last 12 months. So that's on the kind of the opposite side of things, is it has to be within the last 12 months. But
Right.
putting in a minimum of like 3 months might make sense.
Threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, thank you. And then my last question is there any off ramp to these levels? For example, if neighbors can demonstrate to the city that this is a concern, is there a procedure by which the city can take over the project and make a determination of how to mitigate and if they are convinced at any of these levels that there needs to be further measures?
Well, there's always the political route. The city council can decide to do whatever they want to do. This is a program to provide residents and a way of working with staff to solve a problem. So our position from a staff level would be that no, we need to try and see if these other things work first, and then see. There are streets that probably have already tried some things and they still have a problem, and so maybe they've already done level 2. Maybe they did level 2 and they're in place now and they were done 10 years ago, but there's still a problem. Maybe those can move right to a level 3 discussion because they've sort of already gone through the process just before the program was adopted. So there's those kind of exceptions, but My concern would be that everybody would want to jump right to putting in speed cushions. And we really want to make sure that we're not jumping right to the, the measure or the device that has the biggest impact on, say, emergency response time.
Thank you, Chair. That's very helpful.
Okay, I have a few questions. I'll jump ahead real quickly to the survey questions, and then I'll go backward. On the survey, tell me when the survey would be required. Is it before a temporary measure is put in, like a pilot, or is it after?
It's to determine the residents' reaction to the pilot program.
So we would have put in some type of intervention, either 2 or 3, and given it a test ride, see how it works, and to gauge neighborhood reaction to it, correct?
Yeah, that's only for, at least at this point, the way it's written, the survey is only for level 3.
Okay. Then it also says on page 9, item number 3, a petition will be prepared by the residents. Will the city provide the residents with email addresses to send the survey out? Will the survey be, I can't recall whether the city approves of the survey. What if there is no organization within this, I wouldn't even call it neighborhood, it could be a street, to undertake this type of initiative? For instance, I couldn't, let's say something was warranted on Brandywine where I live. There's, I don't know, maybe there's 24 houses. There, I don't see anyone stepping up and becoming the master planner for Brandywine Drive and organizing the petition, gathering the email addresses, collecting the data, scrubbing the data. Tell me more about that, Tom. Tell us more about that.
Sure. So the petition process is one where there does become a burden on the resident to go out and collect. The city would be helping them prepare that petition, because the maps that show the properties that are affected that they need to go out and talk to is something that's produced by the city. So the city would determine these are the properties that are directly affected by what the resident or residents are asking to undertake. The city would approve the petition before they are able to go out and get any signatures on it. So we want to make sure that they have all the right information, that they're not putting information on the petition that is false, to make sure that the person that they're approaching has, as much information as possible that reflects, the conditions as the city sees it. But the burden still does, at least the way the program is written now, the burden does fall on somebody or a group of people to go out and probably on foot collect those signatures, and that's the way that they've always been done. The bigger the neighborhood, the bigger group you need to go out and help collect. And again, like I said earlier, most neighborhoods that I've implemented these in, it's taken, 2, 3, sometimes 4 months to knock on everybody's door. You know that person's never there when you go at certain times of the day, so you try and go on a mid-Sunday afternoon and hope they're at home watching a football game and they'll answer the door or something. But that is the most difficult part of the process is the petition process.
The petition process is the easiest to do for an individual resident who gains some matter of support from others to go knocking. It's the survey part that is much more complicated. And that if the city shares property information, let's say that the burden is on the local resident to administer the survey, distribute it, collect it with information that's provided by the city, you're compromising, I think you're compromising private information about who owns properties. And it's a major effort for an individual to engage and administer the survey. The petition process is something that has worked for time immemorial. The survey process is something that is a very heavy burden of activity. I'm thinking there should be some way for the city to engage that. Maybe the homeowners have to put some skin in the game to pay for the survey to be done. But I think it would be hard. I'm very conversant with surveys. That's part of what I do professionally. And for me to do that in my neighborhood would be a large effort to secure the information. First of all, get the survey, the questionnaire approved, written in the right way, that the project type described properly, and then acquire the email addresses to distribute the survey and have it go to a survey monkey and collect the data. But it seems to me the city would be providing me with 25 or 30 property owner email addresses, which I think is I don't know whether I want my colleagues' opinions, whether that's a matter of privileged information. Let's see, Matthew, you're the attorney, and Jill, I think you're an attorney. Tell me whether is the city allowed to share private information about email addresses with such that Peter Vall could then go conduct a survey?
Let me address that first. Sorry. The survey process is the city's process. The city does the survey.
Oh, okay. Then
Yeah.
Scratch that.
Yeah, because it needs to be unbiased. So
Yeah.
the city needs to do the survey. And if it's not clear in the language that's there now, please give us a markup of language you think works better.
Well, you can see that my reading of it was, it felt like the entire burden was on, much of the burden was on the homeowners. So just take that direction in rewriting it. In section 3 of petition requirements, it says, persons submitting petitions must attempt to contact all affected parties. What does attempt mean? Somebody might come back and say, you should define what attempt means so that the community group, the street group, knows what you're asking them to do.
That's a good question, because we've had issues before with people that have gone and said, hey, I've knocked on that door 10 times in the last 3 months and nobody ever answers. I don't even know if anybody lives there.
Right.
How much more do I have to go? I'm at 88%. Do I really need to get to 90% by finding that person? And if they can document the times that they went and knocked on the door by having a log, that's probably fine. So it's a process that's meant to as you said, put some skin in the game, and we want to see that there's some effort.
Well, to maybe define it somehow or other, or indicate that city staff will elaborate on what many of the protocols in this guideline are defined as. So let me back up the truck a little bit. Back on page 6, where you say, you said it talks about the following steps are to be followed. Resident informs the city, staff will review. What happens when a council brings it? There's a council path, and then there's a commission path to this process. And I think you might want to define that. This is a process that lays out the steps for residents, not necessarily if city staff identifies that there is a problem on Brandywine and Declaration, and that it's of enough concern that it needs to get scrubbed. Robert, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, so the council path is staff gets directed to work with the neighborhood to figure something out. That's a pretty easy path. I think we all understand that council can direct. The commission path, it is a little more difficult for me to answer, and Robert may want to weigh on this, but the commission is an advisory body to council and to staff. This process is for the residents to have a path. So we could write a commission path But if the commission wants to go out and do something and the residents aren't supportive of it, I don't know if that's going to be very effective in the long run. Maybe the commission could say, hey, we've been hearing that this street or these streets in this neighborhood has a problem. So maybe the city's process is we go out and we talk to a few residents and see if they think it's a problem. But I don't see an outcome where the commission is deciding what gets done and how it gets done and the time frame it gets done, sort of outside of the neighborhood being involved in the process.
So
Robert,
go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Again, the role of the commission is getting direction from council or department head to make some decision. I don't think the role of the commission is to start identifying the problem neighborhood. If somebody's calling you saying, hey, I have problem, then these are the guidelines you give them. Tell them these are your solution. This is what you need to do. Contact the appropriate staff. They will look into it. Otherwise, I don't think commission should be taking any position. And that will be something that it's basically to the guidelines. So the role of the commission is, that Tom mentioned, advisory to city council and myself. If I have an issue that I need the advice and recommendation to council, I will bring it to commission first. Then with your approval, we'll go to council, or you disapprove it, because we do have a lot of false sort of sense of security or speeding. People standing on their street, they claim somebody drive 50 miles per hour till I gave them this handheld speed survey. They see there's nothing over 35. So we got to be careful. Again, this is a tool for resident for specific issues, but I don't want to convert this to a project that's gonna cost a lot of funding and a lot of staff time to determine no is not doable. So we got to be very cautious on that. I hope I answered your question or concern.
Oh, you answered somewhat, thank you. So my suggestion is that the outset of these guidelines, to Tom and Robert, to lay out that this is a process by which residents or residents of Calabasas can engage the city in the consideration of traffic calming measures. But you also should say that their city council reserves the right to consider traffic calming measures at its discretion. So that way a resident can then knock on the door of their council person and say, listen, I want this to come to the commission's attention.
I think I need to review that with city attorney. I mean, you don't want to create something that every resident go to your council. Council wants us to do this, so otherwise, then why do we need to have tools? If you have a problem, just call your council member, put pressure on them. So we got to be careful. We don't want to create the tools, then at the same time get rid of the tool, say, if you really have a problem, call your council member. So remember, at the same time, council really needs your advisory board, your input, and they need these tools and guidelines. So I will be cautious about that.
So so there is no, let's say I've identified a problem at the intersection of Brandywine and Declaration. From what you just said, it seems like I can't bring that to the commission for staff to take up as a matter of analysis.
You can do citizen requests and say, I'm Peter Walk, have this problem. We will first look at it, see, do you really have a problem, or it was isolated situation? After 27 years, I can assure you 80% of the complaints that I got were isolated situation. They weren't ongoing problems. So again, we got to be cautious, not create a lot of work for staff that they are isolated situations.
So then we need to make sure that as this policy goes forward, our residents know what it's for, which is for them, for the residents of the city to have a process by which matters requiring attention by staff can be followed.
Excellent. I like that.
So let me go over a few more points. I'm really not going to hopefully get too detailed here, although I did. The question on let's see, there was a question here. You answered my survey questions. What happens if we have a street that we're working with which is a street of citywide importance, one where the residents don't bring the matter to the city's attention. Let's say we're talking about Park Sienna near the entrance to the lake, the path that walks down to the lake. I have no idea whether any residents in the area see that the potential conflicts between vehicles parked and moving and pedestrians could engage. But it's something that I, as a resident of the city who uses that street all the time, may have. I'm not a resident of the area, but I think it's a threat to the safety of my fellow Calabasas residents. How does that, would that be something where I would bring it to the attention of the council, or how does that get taken care of?
Can I speak? I want to just, using your example, first we have to have the question answered. I'm not really clear. Do you have to be an immediate resident, and what is the radius of the zone? But beyond that, if you, Chair, were talking to me and told me that this is a problem area, I, knowing you and your background and your expertise, would take that at face value. I would support that. So, having said that, I am happy to answer, but I don't think it's a problem, because again, if another resident who I do trust tells me there's an issue, you know, I may want to investigate it myself, but at the same time, I trust my fellow citizens, right?
So Park Sienna is actually not a street that would qualify because it doesn't have fronting residential in those areas. It would be something where if there's a safety concern along the street, it would be through the normal citizen request process, and it would be a city staff effort to try and resolve. We have been looking at the issue with that crosswalk there and have done a number of improvements recently to try and draw more attention to it. There are other streets that may have fronting residential, and if those neighbors don't think it's a problem who live there, I find it hard to believe that a resident that lives outside the area would say, hey, we need to do something on their street. To answer Matthew's question about the radius, it gets into that discussion about who's directly impacted and who is, say, inconvenienced or needs to know what's going on. And typically the way that agencies define that is if you live on the street and you have to drive, or you live on a street that has to drive on that street that you're putting the device, whether it's the roundabout or speed cushions or whatever, if it's part of what you have to do to get to and from your normal daily activities, you are impacted by that, and you get to be somebody who is signing the petition and is answering a survey.
Mr. Chair, I think we are confusing if there is a problem area. Right now, if you have a program, you just call the city, we will look into it. Neighborhood traffic calming is when you have to really install devices in the area that will impact that street. So let's just concentrate on this neighborhood traffic calming tools rather than isolated situation. I agree with you. If you have problem and you go to Gilson and say, I cannot make a left turn. Well, that's isolated situation. You get on the citizen request program. We will schedule somebody to visit the area, see if there's something missing or something we can do about that. But neighborhood traffic calming, totally different tools for different type of issues.
So Robert, let's just follow on to your point there. Let's say you decide, oh, that the left turn problem, it warrants a no left turn sign. Are you going to contact the residents and do a survey about that measure, or will the city act unilaterally in its best judgment?
City has a licensed traffic engineer that make those decisions. Unfortunately, does anybody with driver license feel like they're qualified? But no, city, we have an ordinance that city traffic engineer and city manager can make those decisions and implement certain traffic calming or safety measures that needed for the city.
What is the current process before this goes into place, presuming that it gets voted in by the council or whatever? Is there any kind of other process at this point for calming, traffic calming program in a residential street, or is that people are just going directly? How are they bringing that to the attention of the city?
We had the tools that they're getting pretty old. We had a policy that is about 20 years old. We did citywide traffic calming measure at one time, and we did not have a lot of issues. We just, since we had Tom, I asked him to update that one, and now we are re-establishing tools, because we do get calls, as I said, isolated situation. A lot of people say, hey, I really have a speeding problem. How many cats and dogs gonna die till you do something? Well, we're gonna have tools now. We're gonna look at some policy and procedure, how we're gonna implement traffic calming. Again, remember, when we establish this, is gonna be costly, and we gotta be careful. You slow the traffic one way, but at the same time, sheriff department need to respond if there is an emergency. Ambulance needs to reach to the person's house if he has a heart attack, and even a minute can make a difference, and so on. So the city has a balancing act that you gotta be very careful. What are we gonna do to solve one's problem, not create problem for others?
Any other comments for to advise Tom on next steps going forward?
My only question, other than my poor joke of since Robert and I live near one another, I guess we're not going to get a speed bump on our street since we don't have 500 cars per day. But what happens when it's not a resident? It's maybe a business owner that would like to raise this issue. And I say that because a business owner raised this issue with me just 3 weeks ago, and it was on Calabasas Road, and they were kind of mentioning that just how fast all the cars are and asking whether speed bumps could be put in. And I thought, well, that's above my pay grade. But the irony is we're now talking about it. So what happens if it's not a homeowner, but an actual business owner?
Yeah, so the program is for local residential streets, which have primarily fronting residential nature. They may have, you know, maybe on the end. So Calabasas Road is a major arterial road that we should, you know, encourage good traffic flow, not encourage speeding, but putting speed humps or cushions or anything on that street would, I imagine the public would really be upset about that, and it would cause issues. So for that would be essentially contact us, or they could call the sheriff's department directly and say, hey, I've been noticing a lot of speeding on this street. Can you go out and do some targeted enforcement?
Okay.
Thank you. So Tom, do you need any further direction from us?
No, but I just wanted to say, if anybody has any markups or written comments that you want to get to me, you can email them, and I can add them into the document if you have a markup that you want to go ahead and send if you didn't get everything out.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no other discussion on the matter, the next item on the agenda is the automated license plate recognition program proposal. Tom, is that you?
Yeah, it will be Tom, and looks like we lost him for a second. Let me get a hold of him.
Too many questions about the other thing.
Yeah, Peter, you scared him. You shouldn't do that. Tom.
I try my least.
Yeah, he will join us. Maybe you want to give everybody 2 minutes break.
Well, why don't we do the, well, would he be doing the division report also, or is that Tatiana?
It's Tatiana. She really prepared.
Let's move there. Tatiana, can you give us the division report?
Absolutely. See, there is
Thank
a change in the agenda. Let me share my screen.
Tom, we're moving Tatiana ahead while you were taking a break there.
I clicked the wrong button and I clicked leave instead of share screen.
Tatiana, please proceed.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, let me start the presentation. For the division report tonight, I will provide you updates for the active projects in the city of Calabasas. We have quite few of them. First is the Rondell Smart Park project. Just a few updates. We're getting closer to completion. Anticipated completion date is mid-August. Southern California Edison completed their work and the site is energized for our project as well as for the hotel. And EVgo charging stations are currently actually operational. It's just not, there is no way to provide safe access right now because of how much construction is still going on, especially for the hotel and all this construction equipment moving around. So that's why they're not open for public, but they are ready. Our landscaping and irrigation subcontractor started work on July 22nd, and these pictures are taken today. So you can see that the already trees, there are a lot of trees, mostly all of them, 90% of trees already planted, and they will be proceeding with the rest of the landscape material. And they should be finishing up in a week and a half or so. We still have a few electrical items to finish and punch list items, and that's it. Mulholland Highway gap closure. Yes, Peter.
Do we have any policies regarding the length that somebody can park in that parking facility and length of time that they can park in the charging spaces?
It's a regular parking lot as any other parking lot in the city. People can park. It's, you know, parking in the public right away. They can park for 72 hours. They're not really designated spaces, but there are spaces closer to the trailhead. There are spaces closer to the public transit stop. So there are plenty of parking for different users. For the charging stations, they park and charge their car and leave.
But they need to be actively charging rather than leaving it. There's some facilities that don't allow parking unless your car is being actively charged.
They need to be, yes, they need to be actively charging, especially because we have plenty of parking spots. There's no reason for them to come to this parking and park on the designated charging station parking spot.
In regard to the 72 hours, that's a citywide ordinance or regulation. Is there a sign that indicates that the vehicle cannot be parked for more than 72 hours?
There's no sign. It's a California vehicle code also, and it's kind of an unspoken rule. There's no really need for that sign. If there are any violations in the future and there is any kind of a need to remind public that they're, you know, abusing their rights, then we might look into that in the future. But right now there's no plan to install anything like that.
Okay, good. I'm just concerned that many communities throughout Southern California are suffering from people parking and over many days and weeks and using it as a place of residence. So I like your idea of attending to it if it becomes a problem.
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
Next project that construction of which is going on right now is Mulholland Highway gap closure. And although there is substantial work going on in this project in the area, there is not too many pictures I can present right now because all work is just grading for retaining walls and for the corner that used to be a parking lot. So this pictures just demonstrate the traffic control that is working very well. There is a travel lane in each direction provided at all times on both Old Topanga and Mulholland. There is a safety fencing, at the school parking lot, and everything is working fine. And contractor is, moving a lot of dirt right now for the month of, the few days in July and August. That's basically what they will be doing. They will be working on the retaining walls, foundation, retaining walls, and that's on their schedule.
When do you envision opening day, if you will, for sidewalk and other safe pedestrian movement?
Completion of the project is scheduled for February of next year. There's a lot of little things we need to complete before we can open everything. There's Southern California Edison support pole, for example. We're working with them on the relocation. There's other facilities that there's Verizon box that we need to relocate. So there is a lot of little things involved to give the exact date when the sidewalk can be safely open. But the completion is February.
Thank you for protecting the oak trees.
Yes, we're doing our best. We are. They're beautiful oak trees.
You said the completion of that project was February?
Yes.
And I would imagine the high school knows that at this point.
Pardon me?
I would imagine the high school knows this.
Yes. We're in communication with Calabasas High School at all times. They were notified. We're in communication with them that all the work that is going in close proximity to the parking lot, to the tennis courts, and yes, they are aware of everything that's going on. Another active project in the city is this year's street resurfacing. It's the annual program, and it hasn't started yet, but the construction start date is scheduled for August 9th. Projected completion is September 3rd. There are not too many locations this year that are close to any of the schools, maybe with the exception of Founders Drive, probably would be the closest one. We are targeting that work in August, but again, it's not on the street that will be, that will affect the school traffic per se, but that's the current schedule as it stands. ADA ramps on Lemons and below will be done on August 17 and 18. August 21st, the contractor will target paving operations. They will do on Founders and Lemons and Belcourt Street and dig outs in the area. August 23rd, 26th, their work on Lodgate and Malibu Hills and dig outs in the same area. August 26th, they will work on Astor Trail, Park Hermosa, Park Melinda. And August 27th, they will do more dig outs, which are scheduled throughout the city.
What is a dig out?
It's a repair. It's a local area repair. It's not resurfacing of the street. It's when there is a problem with the asphalt and base, when the contractor has to remove dug deeper to remove certain area that is damaged and replace the subgrade and asphalt in the area. So it's not like the whole width of the street or a certain area. It's just the local area removal and replacement.
Thank you.
And the last slide for tonight is Public Works citizen request. This data is for the since our last Traffic and Transportation Commission meeting. So this data for the past months, and we received 35 total requests, and leaders are the city services and trees and plants and street repair potholes, and of course the miscellaneous other. And when people submit, they don't know exactly to which category assign this, so they just go to street maintenance miscellaneous requests. But that's our typical number. It's a little bit less than last month.
Thank you, Tatiana.
Thank you.
Any questions from the commission for Tatiana and the director's report? Hearing none, Tom, it's back to you.
Thank you. It's yours.
Thank you, Tatiana.
All right. So now we're going to talk about the automated license plate program. With me tonight is Sergeant Painter with the LA County Sheriff's Department to help answer any questions at the end. So first off, I want to talk about what ALPR or license plate recognition program is and kind of why we're here talking to the commission about it. So these types of systems use cameras, remote controlled cameras essentially, or self-controlled, for monitoring of license plate information along the city's roadways to help enhance law enforcement. It gives them opportunities through recognition of those plates to give alerts for vehicles or people of interest that that are in the city. These are provided through what's called a hot list that comes from the Department of Justice and is updated every 2 hours. So when something is reported, the Department of Justice will put it on that list, and that goes into the system, and the Sheriff's Department would be notified if that license plate pops up. It provides additional information for investigative purposes. It helps in many agencies that have had these in for a while. It helps deter criminal behavior because the criminals will either eventually know that the systems are in place, or they through word of mouth they will tell each other that, hey, Calabasas or whatever city has those cameras in, and they seem to be catching people. And one of the cool things about the system is it's a shared database between all the law enforcement agencies that are using the one or two systems that are available out there. So if the city of Ventura has a crime that's committed and they put that license plate and that person into the system, and that person drives into Calabasas, then the Sheriff's Department would get notified, and they would be able to help the Ventura PD to solve that crime, and vice versa. This request came to the city separately, but kind of closely related from both the Sheriff's Department and from the Greater Mulholland Homeowners Association. The Sheriff's Department was approached by Greater Mulholland at some point in time, and ultimately received a proposal from Flock Safety Systems, and it's really what the Sheriff's Department is looking for when they approached us about this is for their general law enforcement purposes. They say that there's a couple locations in town where we're getting speeding or speed contests that they think these would be helpful, and to help monitor for stolen vehicles. So what this program is not is it's not taking photographs of actual people or drivers or passengers in the car. It's taking a picture of the back of the vehicle and it's identifying through that picture, through an algorithm, the license plate number and the make and potentially the model of the car. When the license plate information is brought up, it actually brings up a picture of what the car looks like. And I'm actually going to change my share real quick to a picture that was shared last night at the meeting. Can you see that? So
Yes.
So this is a picture from their system, and you can see. So if we look at the white car in the lower middle, if the Sheriff's Department were to go in and to look up that plate FLQQQ-P85, this picture would come up, and it would then, by looking at the picture, they would be say, okay, it's a white car and it's a Nissan, and that would help them in identifying when they go to search for that vehicle. It's not a red light or speed enforcement camera. although red light enforcement is allowed in California, speed enforcement through an automated system is not. It's not used for signal operations. So that picture in the lower right corner is of video cameras that the city uses for monitoring traffic that allows the traffic signal to know when traffic is there and when it is not. The data is not compiled or used or sold to other companies for advertising purposes. It's strictly forbidden by state law to be used by anybody except law enforcement. And the city and the law enforcement agency are both required to have policy on its use. So attached to our staff report is a copy of the draft policy that was prepared by the city attorney's office. The sheriff's department also has a policy that I believe have adopted recently, and they have been using ALPR programs in other cities. So how does it work? The camera is mounted on either a city or an SCE streetlight pole. It can be powered by solar or conventional power, depending on which product it is. And then, like I said earlier, it captures the vehicle license plate using an algorithm in the computer in the camera. And then it stores that photo in their system for 30 days. After 30 days, it automatically deletes it and is overwritten by new data. If the law enforcement wants to use that, so if they go and they look at that picture I showed earlier and they say, oh, we need to save that, they can save individual pictures with associated data into their own database, and that has to be saved by state law for a minimum of 2 years. The sheriff's department can have this hot list or watch list, so when a license plate comes up, then they get notified. The 5 locations that the sheriff's department is initially recommending that we consider for kind of a pilot program is on Las Virgenes at Agoura, Calabasas at Parkway Calabasas, Park Ora at Park Sorrento, Calabasas Road at Old Town right at the city limit, and Mulholland Highway at Old Topanga. Now these are locations, the 4 locations other than Park Ora at Park Sorrento, although to some extent that also are sort of gateways into the city. The one at Park Ora and Park Sorrento, my understanding is that it was specifically chosen because of issues with speed contest in that area, and that this would help them identify license plates so that they can go knock on doors and talk to people. The cameras do only take pictures going one direction. So some cities, after they go through a pilot program, they'll put a lot more cameras out so they can get cameras coming in and out. So it kind of creates the system where you know they've come in and you can look for them, and you know if they're moving around in the city, kind of where they're going, but you also know when they leave. The city of Ventura put in 11 initially, and they liked them so much that they're putting in another 20 or 30 more. So many cities have seen a big advantage to this from an enforcement perspective. There's 2 systems that are currently available: Vigilant Solutions, which is one that I worked with out in the city of Eastvale. They are mounted on traffic signal poles, and they need direct wiring to power. They also need connection to a communication system. And you need 1 camera per vehicle lane. So if you have a street that has multiple lanes, you need multiple cameras. And it's usually a pretty high cost, and but the ongoing sort of subscription cost is fairly low. Flock Safety, which is the system that's being recommended by the sheriff's department, is smaller cameras, and they can be mounted on not only any city streetlight or SCE owned, any city signal pole or an SCE owned streetlight pole, but the city could go out and actually put in kind of a 3-inch square post like we would put a sign on, and mount these on there with the solar panel. The solar panel does have a battery backup in it, so it would power it if we have any power outage or anything, because it's running off of solar. One of the good things about this camera is it's relatively small, so it's not visually obtrusive to the neighborhood, and it can capture data across multiple vehicle lanes. So there's there's kind of lower cost because you need less cameras. The subscription model that Flock has is kind of an initial low cost, but a higher ongoing cost for the subscription kind of back-end processing. This picture was a picture I took in the city of Port Hueneme near the port. So the next steps, we spoke last night with the Public Safety Commission, and we're here to talk tonight to you folks and get comments and suggestions, and if possible, a recommendation to City Council. And we're going to be taking this to City Council at some point in the future. And the Sergeant and I are available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Tom. Any questions, brethren and sisters? Hearing none, I'll start off. I'm sorry, Jill, please go ahead. You're muted. There you go.
Thanks. I had a question. My notes say page 44, but I think that is an electronic page. There was a mention of city training sheriffs.
That's the city's draft policy. So one of the things that's required by the state law is there has to be training of any city staff that uses the system, and included in that is the sheriff's department, because they will be the primary user of that system. Many of the officers that are at our sheriff's station at Lost Hills have already been trained in the Flock system because they're using it now in other communities.
And the other thing I just wanted to point out is that there's a discrepancy in the description of purpose and scope in attachment A and attachment B. There's a little bit of confusion over whether the purpose is to identify, deter, reduce, or mitigate criminal activity, or whether it is to address street racing or catching stolen vehicles. So I think it would be it would just be a bit of a tighter presentation if the purposes were consistent.
Thank you. Attachment A is the draft city policy, which was written by our attorney's office and reviewed by Public Works and Administration. The second attachment B is a marketing proposal that was given to the sheriff's department from Flock Safety. So there's naturally some inconsistencies because that's sort of their marketing pitch for why we should use their system. It's not a contract. It's just their kind of proposal for what they think their system does. Whereas the policy is what the city is saying. This is what we're saying the purpose is for.
Jill, anything else?
Thank you. That makes it very clear. Thank you.
Jock, please.
Yeah, I might have missed it, but is there a plan on letting the residents of Calabasas know what these things are for versus someone just looking up and going, why is there a camera up? You know what I'm saying? Is there any kind of educational piece that will go out to the residents saying this is what we're doing and this is for your safety? Because I imagine there'll be some people objecting to it, but just curious.
Yeah, we've had those discussions internally. It's a great question because we anticipate that there will be some people that don't like that there's cameras looking at them. That's part of the internal discussions we're going to have next is sort of what is the rollout if city council decides they want to move forward with it. You know, what rollout do we have? What's our role in it? What's the sheriff's department role in that? And what is the vendor going to provide in terms of materials to let the public know? But, you know, we have a really good media and TV presence that I'm sure will help us put together something that can get out to the public.
Thank you.
this is either for Tom or Sergeant Painter. So thank you very much, Sergeant, for being with us this evening.
Oh, thanks for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Sorry, I haven't talked, so I don't know whether or not you can hear me or not.
Thank you for being with us. And I'll throw this question out to either Tom or Sergeant Painter, and that is, if the residents in our city and property owners of both commercial or residential properties know that it's out there, can they call the sheriff's department or the city or both of you to say, hey, listen, there's this reputable looking car out on the street. I want you to vet it. Is that how this works? Or is it something where the LA the sheriff's department or city is notified that there's some nefarious vehicle on the streets? Which way how does it work?
For our policies, something like that would probably be outside of what our policy would allow us to look something up. In order for us to make any type of inquiry as to a vehicle or a license plate, it has to be associated with an active ongoing investigation. So both state law and our policy requires this to be kind of a need to know, right to know kind of thing. So unless it is associated with a crime and in a criminal investigation, it kind of precludes us from just going in and searching for different cars.
So it has to be a crime in progress, or let's say there's a vehicle parked out in the Courtyard shopping center, and it looks suspect. The owner of the Courtyard can't call up and say, hey, I think there's a vehicle here that isn't supposed to be here, and maybe it's involved in some ongoing investigation.
In that type of situation, I think we would just send a deputy over to investigate that car for something like that, instead of relying on this. This is more or less for once a crime occurs, this allows us to go back and generate further investigative leads.
So on that, excuse me, Chair, if I can hop in, I am looking at the operations. I do want to preface this by saying I just came back from Dubai and Croatia, which are both very low in crime. And anything that law enforcement says is a valuable tool, I want to pay close attention to and give them and ask what the price is. So first, looking at the price, it seems like it's worth it. It seems like this is a good price. Less than $15,000 going to cost for 1 year for 5 cameras. I hope we get a good deal. I hope we get a good contract so that if we want more, it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, because it seems like cities that got this want more. But looking at the operations, looking at the policy, it looks like this could be used for more than just quote unquote a criminal investigation. This could also be used for code enforcement. And this is specifically Section 4, subsection B, code enforcement, which would include, and this is the question, would it not, potential speeding violations? And I guess the context would be a resident reports a speeder on a street, and then in theory, law enforcement can refer to the system and see if a car of that make and model did match being in that vicinity at that time. That's sort of an example, right? Is that what it would be used for? Also code enforcement?
So let me bifurcate that a little bit. There's code enforcement, which would be more associated with sort of building code and other code violations on somebody's property. And then there's this speed enforcement where somebody is violating the speed ordinances of the code. So I'll let Sergeant Painter address those, and then I can talk a little bit about the code enforcement side of things.
Right. For traffic incidents or things of that nature, like the camera isn't really going to tell us if someone is speeding or anything of that nature. It just tells us what car is on that street at what time. When it comes to infractions, they're not infractions that happen outside of our presence, aren't really enforceable. we can't go back after the fact and write someone a ticket because someone else said that person was speeding. I think if we did use it for that purposes, it more or less, hey, this person's speeding through here every day. We may be knocking on their door and saying, hey, could you please slow down? Things of that nature.
Thank you, Deputy.
Yeah, so from the code enforcement perspective, from like the planning building side, we talk with them about it because there is the possibility, and we've had issues in the city with large gatherings during COVID and those sorts of things where these could possibly be used to identify a group of vehicles coming in and out during certain times of the day when they're not supposed to be gathering or doing certain things. And
yeah.
At least at this point, the community development department has said that they're not interested in using it, but they say if it becomes a tool that they want to use in the future, the policy can always be updated and they could be added in.
So, I mean, it looks like the way it's written now, because of course, the California Vehicle Code is code, and under here, that would be inclusive. Yeah. So is there any benefit? And if we want to enforce the vehicle code via these devices, so be it. But I mean, even adding the word city in front of code enforcement investigation would create clarity and specificity in regards to enforcing the city code, using your example parties. Is there any benefit to that? I open up the floor.
No, so that was a question that the attorney and I talked about it, and it is allowed in his opinion to do code enforcement. It's just a matter of the community development department who oversees those code violation issues. It is not interested. They don't think they have the staffing or the ability to effectively utilize it now. There's questions whether, the requirement that it be only used by law enforcement, to what extent then is the sheriff's department helping our code enforcement folks go out and make sure that people have their trash cans in, and all those types of things that are code violations that the cameras could help in regards to vehicles and license plates. We don't want to have our sheriff's department helping code enforcement doing code violations. So it may require some change at the state level in legislation to allow, or at least designate, like a building official to be somebody who's authorized to use it.
Any other questions or comments? Tom, what did you hear from public safety last night?
Well, they had similar questions. There's several things that they asked last night that we had answers to that I provided in my presentation. So the picture that actually showed the vehicles, I got a screen capture of that last night and was able to show that. And in my discussion, I was able to include a lot of things that that I was not aware of that the vendor had details on. One of the things, so like for instance, although the Sheriff's Department probably knows this, but the sort of that list that goes into the system is updated by the Department of Justice every 2 hours. So that data that's in there, that it's looking for license plates and matching it, is very relevant.
Very good, thank you. And Robert, what are you looking for from this commission? Because it seems like my first read on this is that it was more under the domain of public safety than traffic. So what are you looking for out of our commission tonight?
Well, number one is really introduction. Hopefully publics are watching. As other commissioner asked, how are we gonna let public know? This is one of the ways of letting public know what city is doing proactive role, coordinating with sheriff department. The input and the questions were valuable. Right now, we're gonna take this back to city attorney, and Tom is finalizing it, see if city council is ready to receive the report.
Thank you.
So I would add to that, if the commission wants to take a position of recommendation or not to council, that's certainly available for action.
Okay, hearing that, is there a motion that any of my colleagues would like to bring forward? Three, two.
I'll bring it forward. I'd like to bring a motion to recommend the city council does pass does adopt the policy as written. I brought up my concerns, my comments. I mean, it seems like everybody is okay with this. So I have a second. You can vote on it.
I would second that.
Hearing a motion and a second, any discussion on the matter?
The only thing I would add to what Matthew just said is has already been, which is let the public know and letting people know, and posting it on the Calabasas Facebook page. You'll be done. Everybody will know.
Yeah, I want the criminals to know, especially. That's what I want to know.
Well,
Spread that.
I think it will be, in communicating with our residents, it'll be very important for our local sheriff station to convey how this tool has helped them enforce and create an environment of safer communities. So discussion, any more discussion on the matter? All those in favor of the motion presented by Commissioner Huzineh, I'll say aye and signal aye.
Aye.
Aye. 100% consent. With that matter, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Sergeant Painter. We look forward to seeing you in future meetings. Thank you, Robert, for providing leadership for this. Tom, do you want to, are there any items for our future agenda that you'd like us to be thinking about?
I will leave that for Robert to answer.
Okay.
Good one, Tom. You're finally getting there. Right now, we do not have any specific item waiting for council to get back to session, see what's going on. We're still dealing with public safety, resident safety, and staff safety at City Hall. And as soon as we have item that the commission needs to guide us and make decisions on it, we will bring it up. So right now I'm expecting probably the next meeting will be in September or October. We will let you know in advance.
Okay. Jason, do you have a comment?
yeah, I just have a question, and I don't know how this gets addressed, and I don't know when to raise it, and I'm always confused by that. And I probably should have emailed you guys to ask. So the same person who was discussing speed bumps on Calabasas Road, which seems to be a bit of a non-starter. Also, the conversation came up because, of course, they heard about the remodel of Calabasas Road in the Old Town District, and they wanted to know how council and staff was going to let the business owners along Calabasas Road know about that, because it will, according to them, greatly affect them, and whether basically they just wanted to know what the plans were. They hadn't heard anything about plans for letting them know as business owners when that was going to take place and how it would affect them. So I've just now relayed the concern. I don't know.
We're gonna make sure on the website there is information on that. I will double check. So please refer them to Calabasas website, or they can call my office. We will let them know. The project's still under design. That was presented to the commission and to planning commission, and it's still gonna go to council even before it get advertised for construction. So we still have about 6 months to go. But if they need to know more details, they should contact our office, or there is on the website, we have information. Tatiana, can you help me on this one? I believe the Old Town Calabasas is on the website, project description, and sort of rough timeline.
Correct. The information, the general information is on the city website. As soon as we'll have more dates, once we'll have the plans, and we'll start advertising, preparing the specifications of the project, we'll put more dates on the city website. And as Robert said, they can always contact the city and inquire about the project.
Robert and Tatiana, can you bring back in our next meeting an update on the project along Mulholland from Old Topanga, well, actually from Old Topanga Road all the way out past Viewpoint?
Sure. We're going to award the project to MNNS, as you all know. We had some issues with Metro to get the approval and the funding. Tatiana did a great job, got that approved. First meeting that council has, they're gonna award the project. when consultant is on a board, we're gonna make sure that the commission has a milestone reports.
Very good. So we'll hear something at our next meeting then.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other items for that my comrades would like the staff to be bringing forward at our next meeting? Hearing none, I'll consider a motion for adjournment then, please.
Motion to adjourn?
And a second?
Second,
Discussion on the matter. All those in favor of adjournment, please indicate by saying aye.
All right.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.